Heads up, you are in the Hoodwood, that corner of the internet for frank, unfiltered sports talk and discussion. I am your man, KJ the Black Bandit. It's new year, new office, new studio, and a new look to the show. Now, this week, we're going to discuss my thoughts on the farce that has become the Baseball Hall of Fame. The sorry final act to the ARod saga. The NFL playoffs heat up, there's 4 teams left, and a look at tanking in the NBA. All that and the fat dap and the head slap, all this week in the hood, but it's been a long time. Should have left you with a dope beat step 2. You ready? I know it's been a while. Let's go! Greetings from the Hoodwood, where new look, new studio, just a new place around. I'm your man KJ the Black Bandit, bringing you greetings for a prosperous and healthy new year. And a new year and in January means that the class of 2014 in Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame was announced. Unlike last year, where no one was elected from the current crop of eligible stars, this year 3 were elected. And it wasn't without a share of controversy and hand-wringing. I don't have a real problem with Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, and Frank Thomas. I was kind of iffy on Frank Thomas, but all 3 of them worthy Hall of Famers with the numbers and cred to be fine additions to the group in Cooperstown. So what I'm still puzzled is why Craig Biggio was left off. He got 74.8% of the vote. 2 votes. 2 votes kept him off. And I'm thinking, who are these 2 riders that could have left him off? And what was their reasoning for it? Over 3,000 hits. The epitome of what a hard-nosed player should be. He played multiple positions, catcher, second base, and the outfield, and was the type of player that I would dare say that was a throwback to the back of the day, the hard-nosed, grimy, grubby, flannel-wearing players that made up the game in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Biggio would have fit right in with them, and his style would have been just as well for Cooperstown. But he was denied. He was left out, which I thought was a bit puzzling. It seemed like the gatekeepers seem to relish their chance to stick it to the ball players that they feel aren't worthy. I mean, my personal beef I have is with Murray Chass, the crusty writer from once the New York Times, who once wielded considerable clout in the baseball world, but now seems to have this ongoing vendetta, if you will, with players he feels use performance-enhancing drugs and that their numbers are tainted. Now, Biggio was one who has always been very big on saying that he has never used performance-enhancing drugs, that his talent and his numbers came as clean as they could be. I've heard people say, well, nobody in the 90s should get in. Well, I disagree with that. Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine are 2 of the foremost that I think that should have been the first to get in when they're eligible. Both of them got in on their first year of eligibility with 91 and 98% of the vote, respectively, for Glavine and Maddux. But what I don't understand is people knocking Maddux or Glavine for playing in that era. I think they should be lionized for playing in that era with all the people who were juicing. To be as dominant as Glavine and Maddux were, both of them over 300 game winners, both of them winning Cy Young awards, both of them winning World Series, both of them being as big a big game pitcher as definition will allow. To knock them for guilt by association is doing a disservice to their talent, to the conditions that they played in, and their style of playing. And I think they were well deserving. As you could say with Frank Thomas. Frank Thomas put over 500 home runs. Yeah, he was a big guy, but they grow him big down south. He was always a big guy. His nickname was the Big Hurt. I mean, me being a diehard Twins fan, I dreaded seeing Frank Thomas come to the plate more often than not because he could hurt you. And he was always had the big booming bat, always put up the numbers. And like I said, I was kind of dicey on his pick, but I was like, he does have the numbers, and he was never a part of any kind of controversial lifestyle. No one ever really thought of him as someone that was involved in PEDs. His career tailed off in the mid 2000s, and he quit the game in 2008. But no one ever really doubted his ability or skill. The couple of the players that didn't get in, Biggio, I always talk about Jack Morris, who was on his 15th year of eligibility, now falls into that abyss that is known as the Veterans Committee. I had problems with some of the writers who didn't vote for Jack Morris. I also had a problem with writers who only voted for Jack Morris. One was Ken Gurnick, who said he refuses to vote for any player who he believes did performance checks. But you don't have proof. If you have a positive test, if you've been busted like a Rafael Palmeiro, you really don't have a leg to stand on. And I have a problem with the writers now getting on this sanctimonious high horse when back in 98 they were lionizing McGwire, Sosa, to a lesser extent Bonds, Griffey, all of these hitters. Remember the advertisement? Chicks dig the long ball? It's kind of funny because Glavine and Maddox, who are now in the Hall of Fame, were part of that Chicks dig the long ball set commercial. But anyway, the thought of the writers saying that McGwire and Sosa saved the game with the long ball. Now the suspicion of performance-enhancing drugs clouds that, and now they want to shunt them. They want to push them to the side. Forget all this stuff. I saw McGwire hit a home run in a 70 home run season. I saw Sosa hit home run that same season. The crowds and the people were so enthusiastic and came back to the game where a lot of people were staying away from the game from the cloud of the 94-95 strike. And many people say that Sosa and McGwire saved the game. And the writers were lionizing them and saying how great they were and how, honest and clean living. Now, with the cloud over them, they're doing nothing but quickly trying to tear them down. And many players of my generation that played the game are under this cloud of suspicion. And as more players are coming up for Hall of Fame vote, Bonds isn't getting anywhere close to it. McGwire's numbers has dropped off. Rafael Palmeiro's dropped off the ballot. So the numbers are there, but the Baseball Writers of Association of America are holding them to almost an unreachable standard and basically adjudging them all guilty by association, which I think personally is wrong. And I think something like that needs to be reviewed by case basis. The numbers are there, and people want to argue it, which is what the Hall of Fame is about. But to throw a blanket on everybody because of guilt by association is wrong. Switching gears to the NFL, the divisional round is now in the books, and now there are 4 teams that are left. In the AFC, you have Patriots who blew out the Colts on Saturday night, and the Broncos who held off a furious rally by the Chargers to advance to the AFC Championship, which is the early game this Sunday, 3 p.m. kickoff Eastern. And my money's on the Broncos, even though Peyton Manning has had his share of troubles with the Patriots from back in the day when he played in Indianapolis. But I think this may be his year. And though Brady and the Patriots basically steamrolled the Colts with a running game, yes, a running game, 6 touchdowns scored by the Patriots offense as they steamrolled the Colts. But I just don't think the Patriots have the horses. if you will, to stay with the Broncos, who I think are offensively more efficient. Last last December when they played on Sunday Night Football, and it was a thrilling shootout that the Patriots won because of a fumble that the Broncos had late in the game that turned what was a tight, taut game. Even though people forget, the Broncos rolled out to a big lead on them on the road in Foxborough. If something like that happens in Mile High, the Patriots aren't going to come back from that. Not from a 24-0 deficit. I don't care what the Chargers did. I think the Broncos took their foot off the gas, which they shouldn't have. And I think that the Broncos have just enough to beat the Patriots in Denver. Now, if this game was a Mile High, I don't know. It would be a little more of a toss-up. But I think that the Broncos can win this game. Now, in the NFC, you have the 49ers heading up to Seattle to play the Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks are as formidable in a venue as a team could be, being 15-1 at home, 16-1 if you count their win over the Saints last Saturday afternoon in the last 2 years. They're 16-1 at home. They don't lose in that madhouse called CenturyLink Field. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, the 49ers are good enough to go up there and beat them. Are they? Really? Do you check the last 2 times the 49ers have played in Seattle? They've been Seahawk blowouts. And both times, the Seahawks jumped out to a big lead and maintained it. I think this game against the Saints in the divisional round was an aberration. Yeah, they jumped out to a big lead, but let the Saints chip away to get back into the game. But the Seahawks were never really in doubt. I think that they had enough to push away from the Saints. Seahawks won the game. The score was 23-15, but I still think the game was never really that close. Now, the San Francisco 49ers went cross-country to Charlotte and basically steamrolled the Panthers, playing a grinded-out game, keeping Cam Newton off the field. And when he was on the field, he was getting, beat on by that rugged 49ers defense. Colin Kaepernick played a decent game. The 49ers offense held onto the ball for quite a bit of the game. And when the Panthers got the ball, they were basically running for their lives. The thing that I continue to stress is that though the Niners are a good road team, and I think one of the few teams that could beat Seattle on a neutral field or at home, I just can't see them going in to CenturyLink Field and winning that game. Is it going to be a close game? I think it'll be closer than the 2 games that they played the last 2 seasons up there. But I don't think that the Niners have the wherewithal. I shouldn't say the wherewithal. I don't think that they have the team enough offensively to grind against the Seahawks defense. Both teams, the Seahawks and the 49ers, both have good defense. But I think that Marshawn Lynch is just enough of an edge with Russ Wilson, with their offense. And the 49ers offense is quite good. Michael Crabtree and Quan Bolden are good receivers for Colin Kaepernick. But I think it's just enough. The Seahawks have just enough to be able to pull out a win. I think the Seahawks are the team that's going to win the NFC NFC, and go on to the Super Bowl, which I think is going to be kind of funny that you're going to have 2 primarily Western-based teams that once were divisional rivals playing in the Super Bowl in the cold in New York. Take a look at the sorry case that is Alex Rodriguez, the disgraced third baseman of the New York Yankees. With him, he could have been so much more, so much of an ambassador to the game, someone who had potential of hitting 800 home runs. Someone who, despite of his please, love me now, New York, could have still been hitting home runs into the short porch and left and right field in New Yankee Stadium, but instead now facing a season-long ban from Major League Baseball, and at 39, the increasingly prospect of the twilight of his career. And the thing is with Rodriguez is he is the type of player that seemed to always look for the easy way around, the quick and fast way to be on top. The whole biogenesis scandal, the lengthy interview for Anthony Bosch on 60 Minutes on Sunday night really delves into the whole character issue that Alex Rodriguez had, where he was so willing, cunning to do exactly what was needed to skirt by the rules and regulations that were governing against performance enhancing drugs, and the increasing enforcement against them since 2007 is making it harder and harder for someone to cheat. But Alex Rodriguez tried, and him being caught up with this whole biogenesis scandal is going to cost him a year at the tail end of his career. Now, Alex Rodriguez is, of course, fighting this suspension in court, saying that he is being made the victim of a witch hunt. And in some respects, I do think there is. I mean, as I spoke in the last segment of how the baseball writers at one time lionized the long ball hitters and now are lampooning them for what they've done. But the fact of the matter is that Alex Rodriguez has admitted before to taking performance-enhancing drugs. So the scrutiny would still be on him. And for him to continue to play that Russian roulette with Major League Baseball, knowing sooner or later he was going to get caught, and that whole biogenesis thing with text messages, wire transfers, documentation that is more or less a smoking gun to point at Alex Rodriguez and his attempt to circumvent, to turn back the hands of time, if you will, on a baseball career to make a run at 800 home runs. Now, Barry Bonds has 762 home runs and is nowhere close to being the Hall of Fame. They basically shut out his career. The Giants released him in 2010, I believe it was, and he hasn't sniffed a baseball game since. Even though he was 65 hits from 3,000, had already broken the Major League Baseball all-time home run record, but his career was basically cut off. Alex Rodriguez has 657 home runs and was due to make a $6 million bonus for every one of the players he passed on the all-time list going up the ladder. And there are some big names still ahead of him. Willie Mays, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, and Bonds. But as it stands now, he might not be able to swing a bat in the Yankees uniform again. And there will be very few teams that will be willing to take him on. The Yankees have looked into cutting Alex Rodriguez and try to dump his salary. But with it being guaranteed contracts, it's going to be very hard for them to do. Of course, Bud Selig is campaigning heavily as he gets ready to leave office to stop guaranteed contracts. Basically, he wants owners to save themselves from themselves. If that makes any sense. But Alex Rodriguez will more than likely not play baseball in 2014. He's going to lose about $20 million, and if the Yankees have anything to do with it, they won't pay him another dime. Is that right? Nobody told the Yankees to sign him to a $275 million contract in 2007. That's an albatross that they should be made to bear. And other players coming up behind Rodriguez should not be made to bear the brunt of financial irresponsibility and the fact that owners are throwing ungodly amounts of money at players. Robinson Cano, $240 million. Joey Votto, $214 million. Albert Pujols, $200 some odd million. Prince Fielder, almost $200 million. Tell me why they're throwing this much money at these players. Are they good? Votto, Fielder, yes. Pujols has had some up and downs. ARod is definitely on the backside of his career, but they're throwing all this money out. It's hard to say, but it's not the players' fault that the owners are throwing this kind of money at them. I was just having a look at the NBA standings as of this evening, and it's an atrocity in the East. I mean, Chicago is 17-18. They're in the 5 spot. They're a game and a half behind Atlanta, who at 20-18 is looking halfway respectable. You have Indiana and Miami as 1 and 2 teams in the East, 29-7, 27 respectively, and 27-10 respectively, and the table just falls off. You're looking at these numbers here, and it's just Toronto barely over 500, Atlanta 2 games over 500. Those are 3 and 4 teams. I mean, it's the look at people talking about our teams in the NBA tanking. You look at Milwaukee 7 and 30. That's just horrid. Orlando's 10 and 27. Philly's 12 and 25. These were respectable teams at one time. I think Philly was a playoff team last year. Looking at the table in the Western Conference, it's a little bit better. I mean, the Nuggets 19 and 17 would be a 4 seed in the East. The Minnesota Timberwolves 18 and 19, they would be a 5 or 6 seed, but they're not even in the playoff hunt here. And of course, then you have the bottom of the table, the Lakers, Kings, the Jazz are just horrid. I caught that Clippers-Lakers game Friday night, and the Clippers just destroyed the Lakers. The Lakers, of course, have zero star power. Pau Gasol is hurting. Kobe Bryant is out. Dwight Howard, of course, shipped off to Houston. They have nobody. And you wonder how many of these teams are throwing it in the tank this year, riding off a 13-14 season, in the hopes of maybe snagging some of these great players that are coming out of college. The one and dones, the Andrew Wiggins, the Jabari Parkers, the Julius Randles, the players that are without a doubt going to be 1, 2, 3 in the NBA draft should they come out, and it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that their stopovers at Kansas, Duke, and Kentucky, respectively, are 1-year cameo appearances, and that they will not stay that long looking for greener pastures in the NBA, which I have long campaigned that making kids go to college or sit out a year between high school and college is one of the stupidest rules in sports, in the NBA, and is doing nothing but making the college game pimp out players and be able to have players under their thumb for a year. And what happens if a great player like Wiggins or Parker or some kid that's in high school now goes to college, damages himself, hurts his knee, or somebody like Greg Oden who was hurt constantly in his year in college, then goes to the pros and is damaged goods, or that teams are leery of picking this player because he's hurt himself in college. A person can graduate high school in June, May or June, and go right into the workforce. work in a factory, work in a restaurant, do anything, digging a ditch, working in a garden, something like that. Nobody's gonna say that, say a thing to them. But this person wanting to go to pros and make millions of dollars, everybody wants to regulate them. You know, nobody's gonna regulate somebody who's making $7 an hour, bussing tables, but they want to regulate this person coming out of high school and making millions of dollars. It's a pimp game. And now it's time for our Fat Dap and Head Slap of the Week. Our Fat Dap goes to the Miami Herald and ESPN's Dan Le Batard, who dared give his vote to Deadspin.com to vote for the players to fill out his ballot for the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, the readers of Deadspin sent back a fairly credible ballot, and the top three on their ballot, or Le Batard's ballot as it would, all made the Hall of Fame. Well, the Baseball Writers Association of America was not amused by Le Batard's revelation that he had help filling out his ballot. They stripped Le Batard of his voting privileges for the Hall of Fame and kicked him out of the Baseball Writers Association of America for a year. Now, their president, Lavelle Neal III, a writer who I greatly respect, was no less than sanctimonious with his "the game needs to be respected," and he made a mockery and a travesty of the game. Did he now? Who's more of a mockery or travesty of the game? Dan Le Batard, who's getting assistance from knowledgeable readers. They didn't give him a sham ballot. Or these writers who put J.T. Snow, Jock Jones, Armando Benitez. No diss to those players. They were good, serviceable players, but not Hall of Famers. Or these idiot writers like Ken Gurney who put one person on his ballot. One! Jack Morris. And he didn't even make the Hall of Fame. Who did more of a disservice to the game? Le Batard by asking for help from Deadspin, or Gurney, who makes a real mockery of the ballot because he only wants to put one person on his ballot? Fat dap to Dan Le Batard for making a principled stand, even if it cost him. Now, our head slap of the week goes to the bitter Steelers fan that just cannot let it go. Disgruntled Steelers fan filed an injunction to delay the NFL playoffs 7 to 10 days to replay the Chiefs-Chargers game that knocked the Steelers out of playoff contention. Now, the man filed an injunction, wants the game to be replayed either on a neutral field or from the point that a controversial field goal miss was played because the Chargers at the time had an imbalanced line and the Chiefs missed the field goal. He thinks that the penalty should have been called, which NFL did rightly say that they missed the call. Now, the man says the officials were negligent and fraudulent when they missed the call, as well as a fumble call in the overtime that would have won the Chiefs the game and again knocked the Chargers out of the playoffs. Now, according to story to CBSSports.com, the Baltimore Sun, the man was seeking an emergency temporary injunction to rectify the situation. As I mentioned before, a solution would have been to replay the kick or letting the Chiefs Chargers replay the game on a neutral field to see who wins the game and ultimately decides playoff berth. Now, the Chiefs and the Chargers are both now out of the playoffs. Chiefs losing on wild card weekend, and the Chargers losing in the divisional round. Steelers didn't even make the playoffs. Now, not only is this guy clueless, but you would hold the playoffs up to replay one game. And like I said, never mind that the Chargers are out, never mind the Chiefs are out. And the Steelers may not have even made the playoffs if the game was replayed. What makes this clown think the results would have been any different? And then if it were, who says the Bengals not given a new lease on life wouldn't have knocked the Chargers out or the Steelers out had they made the playoffs? A big slap to this moron who's wasting the legal system and holding up the judicial system with a frivolous loss. Now that's the show for this week. You can catch Musings from the Hoodwood print version every week on BabSports.com. I post that every Tuesday. And the video blog drops around every Wednesday or Thursday, depending on the production schedule. We're on YouTube. And if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, possible topics for discussion for the show, just drop me a line. You can send an email to me at kjgreen920@gmail.com. I want to say the Black Betty Productions email site, but that's experiencing some technical difficulties. I'm trying to get that back online as quickly as possible. If you do also want to send any kind of video posts, send to that email, kjgreen920@gmail.com, and I may just edit it into the show and answer your questions. That's the show for this week. I'll see you next time. Until next post, fellow sportsman.